channel. I'm Rachel, the owner and creator here at the Eclectic Cottage in Spokane, Washington. Today is Wednesday and I have another couple thrift flips for you guys for today's video. They're both items that have been in my stash for a little while, one a lot longer than the others, but I love how they all came out, even though the second project, you guys, one of those things where halfway through I almost just went ahead and scrapped the whole thing, but I persevered and got finished with them. Can hardly wait to show them to you, and without further ado, let's get to today's video. My first project is this little clock that I've had in my stash for a very long time. I already removed the clock mechanism and I am giving it a bath to start using some Krud Kutter followed by some clean water. Now this little thing I've actually pulled out a couple different times and ended up putting away again just because I could not decide what I wanted to do with it. And so I finally figured it is time to get it done and out on the floor. Now I did finally manage to come up with a plan for this little clock, and my plan involves having a dark base coat. So I am using DIY cottage color called Anvil to paint over the red and green. Now a couple things, I probably could have taken this outside in the cold and given it a base coat of some black spray paint. I just really didn't want to be out in the cold, first of all, and second of all, have to wait for the spray paint to dry. So I decided to just go with this route. Now, you can probably see here, the cottage colors do tend to be a little bit thinner than your standard DIY paints, and that is partially because of the built-in sealer. But the built-in sealer is kind of why I wanted the Anvil to start with, because I knew I was going to be wet distressing and I didn't want to accidentally distress back to the red or the green paint. So I just took my time and I ended up with 3 coats of the Anvil. I just dried it really quickly with my hair dryer between coats, and honestly, it really didn't take me that long. Once I was done with the Anvil, I am going over it with a couple coats of DIY's Crinoline, which is their standard paint line and very easy to wet distress. I did go ahead and flip this over and give that ugly green bottom a couple coats of the Anvil as well before I moved on to my next steps. Now, if you follow me very often, you know I'm not a huge fan of brush strokes in my paint. And that's another nice thing about the cottage colors is they're self-leveling, so there are no brush strokes. But since I went over it with the Crinoline, I had a few of them. And so I'm going in with some 220 grit sandpaper and just giving this a quick light sand to get rid of some of those brush strokes. Now my plan for this includes putting some transfers on it, and if you ever plan to put transfers over a surface that you have sanded, you really want to make sure that you get rid of all of that sanding dust. So here I just took this over to my sink, gave it a good spray down, and then very gently dried it off with a dry shop towel. Once I was done with that, I started the wet distressing process, and I'm just going around all the edges and curves and corners with that damp shop towel and just rubbing back a little bit of that crinoline paint so that you could see some of that beautiful Anvil color peeking through. I'm going to be using a transfer from the Lavender Bunch transfer set by Redesign with Prima. Now this is one I've had in my stash for a long time, and I'm really trying to go through some of those and use them up. And unfortunately, this one I don't have available on my website. Once I figured out where I wanted my transfer, I just peeled that backing off, laid the transfer down very carefully, kind of rubbed it down a little bit with my fingers, and then I began rubbing it in with the transfer stick as I peeled back that piece of vellum. Now, if you do accidentally pull up part of your transfer with the vellum, you just want to lay it back down and re-rub that area until all of your transfer is adhered. Then you want to burnish it in. I usually use a piece of the vellum from the transfer itself. That helps eliminate any air bubbles and really make sure that your transfer is seated well onto your piece. Once I had my first transfer applied, I went ahead and added a few more to the sides and front for a little bit more color. Once I had all of my transfers applied and burnished in, it was time to seal my paint. And for that, I'm using DIY's clear wax. Now, as I've mentioned in the past, DIY regular paints are clay-based and they can be reactivated with water, which is why they're such a great candidate for the wet distressing, but it also means that you definitely want to seal them. The waxes tend to be my favorite way to seal a piece. I love the soft feel that they give to the paint and the matte finish that you end up with. Then it was time for the most nerve-wracking part of this entire process, which was putting the little clock mechanism back together again. Thankfully, I managed to get it back together without breaking anything, and it seems to be working just fine, so I was very happy for that. Once I had my clock set and it was working like it should, I thought that it was missing something. So I ended up grabbing a handle out of my stash, gave it a quick coat of black spray paint. And yes, I did this in my kitchen. Thankfully, it was just a small thing and it wasn't too stinky. And once it was dry, I went over it with a little bit of decor wax in Eternal by Redesign with Prima. I think this was the perfect finishing touch for this little clock, and I love how it came together. I hope you guys do too. Now, have you ever had a project that you got into it and almost decided to just go ahead and trash it because it wasn't going your way? This project was definitely one of those for me. I got these two little statues at the Goodwill. I think I paid $3.99 a piece for them. I knew they had issue, but I figured it would be a snap to fix them up and get them out on the floor. I started by giving them a coat of this Heirloom white Rustoleum spray paint. The reason I went ahead and did this first is I wanted to seal them because I had seen where each of them had places that the finish was gone, and they were made of that weird material that actually disintegrates if it comes in contact with water. So this was basically a way for me to seal them up so that I could really assess them and start fixing them. I decided that Bondo was probably my best option for going over the areas that had eaten away on these, which for both of them was a little bit on the bottom, and on the boy statue, some of his, the cuff of his pants on his leg. So this is me just kind of using my finger to spread out that Bondo to try and fill in all of those voids. Once my Bondo was dry, I grabbed some sandpaper and started sanding. And as I was working on the little girl, I saw a couple other places that needed a little attention. So rather than mix up another stinky coat of Bondo, I grabbed out my Spackle and just used that to smooth out a few of those rough edges. Once I was finished with her, I set her aside and then I moved on to the little boy statue, smoothing out the bottom of it and then using the sandpaper to do my best to try and blend that Bondo into the leg of the statue and make it look like it belonged. I did find a couple places on him that I had missed with the Bondo as well. So again, I'm just kind of going in with a little bit of spackle and smoothing that over any rough edges. Then it was on to paint. Now, in all honesty, I really didn't have a great plan for these. I had wanted initially to do like a concrete effect on them, but I knew getting down into all of the nooks and crannies on these pieces and having that turn out evenly would be a real challenge. So I decided instead to just start off with a coat of DIY's Crinoline. I did try pouncing it on with my bigger brush, but as you can see, I ended up switching out to a little detail brush so that I could get into all of those little nooks and crannies. I ended up just using the bigger brush to go over the wider areas to eliminate any brushstroke marks. Now, as I was painting these, I realized I was reactivating the spackle to some degree, and I ended up having to re-spackle a couple areas. And once I was finally done, had everything painted and all the spackle repaired, I thought it might be prudent to go ahead and seal these. I didn't want to have to try and clear wax them. I didn't know at this point what I was going to do with them. And so I decided to just go in with a coat of DIY's clear liquid patina and at least get everything sealed up so that I could move on. Now, honestly, this is kind of where things went a little awry. I thought that since I wanted these to have a kind of gray stone look to them, I would try doing a wash using old and gray liquid patina thinned with a little bit of water. So I'm just going over these with a very liberal application of this thinned out old and gray, and then I'm using a dry shop towel to blot or dab off the excess liquid. You can see here the gray cast to the little boy. It definitely looks a little different than it did before, but in all honesty, it really wasn't making me excited about the finish. I really wasn't liking it. I went ahead and finished up the little girl just to see if I would change my mind, but in the end, I decided to go a different direction. Now, since these had already been sealed, I went ahead and grabbed another liquid patina by DIY, and this is their copper liquid patina. Now, to be honest, I really don't know what made me choose this copper patina over just restarting with a coat of paint on these, but I was halfway through the girl and trying to figure out exactly where I wanted to go after this. Didn't have any idea, but I thought, you know what, just finish with this copper paint and then we'll figure it out from there. In the meantime, I had set both of my little statues in front of my fireplace to dry, and about a week ago, I went to warm up in front of the fire and accidentally kicked the little boy statue, and his little body went right under the fireplace, but his little head did not. So I accidentally decapitated him, and so I had to grab out my E6000 glue and glue his little head back on. And then this is me very carefully brushing some spackle into the crack all the way around him so that I could repaint him with that copper patina and move on from there. As I was fixing this little guy, I finally decided on a course of action to finish these statues up. And what I decided to do was just go over them with a coat of DIY's dark wax. Now, honestly, I was still a little unsure if I had made the right decision here, but as I went along, I really ended up liking how these statues turned out. This aged copper look is very pretty, and I love the way the dark wax really brings out the detail in these pieces and tones some of the shine of the copper down. I'm using a pretty small brush to apply a very liberal coat of that dark wax, and I'm using the brush to work that wax down into all of the grooves and the nooks and crannies on this little statue. Once I had a good coat of the dark wax all over the little boy statue, I went in with a dry shop towel and just dabbed off some of the excess wax. Once I'd finished with the little boy statue, I set him aside to dry while I went to work on the little girl statue. Now, a thing to note about using the wax like this and not wiping back the excess is that these little statues will feel kind of tacky to the touch until that wax has time to dry. It takes about 24 hours for wax to dry to the touch, and then about 30 days for it to cure completely. In this case, though, I'm not really worried about the cure time. These guys were so much more work than I ever thought they would be, and I know I will never recoup the amount of labor that I put into them, but in the end, I really like how they turned out, and I hope you guys do too. That is it from here for today, you guys. What did you think of my thrift flips for today's video? I hope you liked them. I know that second one was definitely a challenge, and there was a point where I really considered just scrapping the whole thing and throwing those statues away, you guys. But in the end, I'm glad I didn't. I really like how they ended up coming out. Hope you guys do too. And I hope you enjoyed the video today. If you did, please remember to give it a thumbs up. I so appreciate that. And if you haven't already, I would love it if you would subscribe to my channel and then just hit the little notification bell so you don't miss anything. And then of course, don't forget to comment below and let me know what you thought of today's projects. Just a quick reminder, I do carry a full line of DIY products here in the cottage. Anything you see me use should be able to be purchased through me at my website, and that's www.theeclecticcottagespokane.com. I carry DIY paint and products, Sweet Pickins milk paint and products, as well as some Recycled Treasures decoupage papers and some Redesign with Prima. So go check those out there. Let's see, Saturday is coming. So for Saturday's video, it will more than likely be some more thrift flips. Yeah, so goodness gracious. For Saturday's video, it will probably be some more thrift flips, so I hope you guys will join me back here for that. Until then, I hope you guys have a great, gosh, I can't talk today, you guys. Anyway, I hope you have a great rest of your week and beginning of the weekend, and I will see you back here on Saturday. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you then. Bye.